Hey everybody, this is Roberto Blake of RobertoBlake.com helping you create something awesome today. So today I'm actually on the road. There was a scheduled graphic design video with the green shirt, the lights, the setup, but some things went wrong, so I have to repost that later. Also, I'm going to give you guys a bonus video this week. I'm going to give you a video about the meeting that I had with Adobe just a few weeks back, and I'm finally allowed to talk a little bit more about that. So today, let's do something a little different. I'm going to give you a little bit of what being a graphic designer is actually like. I will probably do a more in-depth video on this in the future, but this is going to be a raw, uncut, low-budget iPhone-style video, and I'm just going to appropriately tell you what being a graphic designer is like from a real-world perspective here in the real world. So let's go ahead and do that real quick. One of the things that I would say being a graphic designer is really like is there is a lot of stress involved, but only if you let it get to you. Deadlines are a reality, but as long as you're being organized, and I've given you some tips in other videos on how to do that, it can be much less stressful. In terms of dealing with difficult clients and bosses, a lot of that comes down to relaxing and not reacting. Take a breath, really think about what's best for the project. Think about how to communicate with this person and get your view across, understanding that they're not a designer. They don't know the things that you know. They don't have the education and the background. You are the subject matter expert, but they are the person in charge, so the key is to make them feel comfortable. Think of it the same way you would as being on a date. Your job is to make the other person as comfortable as possible and to make the experience enjoyable. It's the same thing with a project that you're working on with a client. You're not there to defend design, you're not there to defend your ideas, you're there to get this thing done in a way that isn't a crucible for either of you, and you're there to do the best work that you possibly can. If they're not going to let you do that, and if they're going to resist you, try to move forward and learn from the experience, and then fire that client or that boss or try not to work with them. And I know that's easy to say, and you may not be in a position financially to do that. So realistically, you should be progressing to a place where that is something that is realistic for you, even if it's not today. You shouldn't be revisiting that same situation 3 months, 6 months, a year from now. You should be positioning to get out of that. I've given plenty of advice on this, but you can also look at my friends Jose Cavalier and Chris Doe's channel, The School, and they give some advice about the business side of design in depth, and maybe that will help you get yourself out of that situation. Maybe you need to be charging more so you can take on clients and use price as a filter to get the best clients that know what they want and are not going to be difficult for you to work with. Maybe if it's a job situation, you find a company whose ideals and whose style matches your own, and you position yourself to work with that company. And you do that by building a better portfolio, learning to talk about your own work, learning to toot your own horn a little, stop playing the false modesty game, and really build up your personal brand. Talk about your work, talk about your process, get your name out there, cultivate the attention that it takes to be on the radar of the people who are decision makers in a company that can make a real difference in your life. If you're not willing to do that, there's no sense in complaining about your situation if you're trying to stay comfortable and not make a real change. So that's what you've got to do. There are other things you can do. You can go to networking events. You can really build up your Rolodex and make sure that you're reaching out to the right people and making a good impression. There's other things you can do in terms of passive income with your design work. You could go ahead and start selling in marketplaces from Envato like Theme Forest or Graphic River, build up some income and do that. Maybe somebody decides to hire you for freelance work off of that as well to do a custom job. You're able to save up some money, and that gives you some leverage. When you don't need money, you have a lot more leverage in your negotiations because you're not coming from a place of desperation. So that's one of the things that I would say is important and what being a designer is really like. The other thing is, there's a lot of research. People underestimate this. Out of a day where I'm really focused on design stuff and not the marketing side, or on my consultancy, or on public speaking, or any of the dozen other things I do other than my design work, I spend a lot of time doing research. I spend time researching stuff for the projects that I'm working on, or even my own internal projects. I spend a lot of time collecting assets and resources, stock photos, paid and free, all kinds of things. I spend a lot of time cultivating a swipe file for inspiration of things that, okay, this is a cool technique that I want to learn. These are some interesting font combinations. I want to see if I can do something with that. There's a lot to be said for gathering things that are going to inspire you, or even looking for just the right music and the right playlist as a designer that's going to make you feel really comfortable in doing your work. So it's a lot of things like that that people take for granted. There is a realistic side of the process that never gets talked about. Everyone talks about the applications. Everyone waxes poetically about design principles, and no one talks about the fact that being a graphic designer means doing a lot of research, building up your inspiration, building up a thick skin. There's a whole process in building yourself into a designer, and I don't think people talk about it, or the fact that it's an ongoing process. Over a decade into my career, I'm still learning things. I'm still researching. I'm still building up these thousands upon thousands of resources I have. I'm still adding to those things every single day, not every week, every day without fail. So, there is a lot of that to be said. There's also some paperwork involved, believe it or not. As a designer, you have to write project briefs, you have to write proposals, you have to communicate with clients, you have to allot some time for dealing with your email. I try to live an inbox zero life and archive things so that I can read them later. So there's a lot of that. There's a lot of getting organized. There's a lot of relabeling your files. There's just a lot that goes into being a graphic designer that is taken for granted. And I will need to do a much more in-depth video about this in the future. But this is just to give you some real perspective in the real world. There's also the meetings, the time you spend on the phone. I'm trying to limit phone calls with clients unless it's something where I need to. I'm trying to limit those calls to 15 minutes because unless you're billing for the calls directly, or you're throwing those into extra billable hours or something and they've agreed to that, it's a time suck. It's a time suck from work you could be doing to market yourself or that's paying you more. And it adds up. An hour-long phone call with a client is not productive. And a lot of people will say, well, it takes whatever it takes to. But if you put a time constraint on something, I almost promise you that when there's a clock on it, people get what they need out of that clock. So if they have 15 minutes to get their point across, people usually can do that. I'm learning this as a public speaker too, that when you have a clock on delivering for something, and this is something you guys may have realized if you've been watching my 10 tips in 5 minute series, there's a lot of great stuff in there. When you give yourself a clock, whether it's 5 minutes or 15, it makes a difference. One of the things I started doing as a graphic designer was spending less time on things. And it didn't mean that I was like being lazy, and it didn't mean that I was trying to get out of putting in the work. It actually meant that I was trying to force myself to think faster and to be more concise, not only in my communication with clients, but also in the work itself. Because realistically, you could do a great piece of work in your portfolio that you spent 10, 20 hours on, right? Here's the problem with that kind of work, and why when you're applying for a job, especially if you're dealing with someone like me, that's not necessarily going to be the way to go, is because we don't have 20 hours for you to spend on a project, and especially not from an agency perspective. That's terrible. It's not that you're spending 20 hours on a project. We need you to be able to prep something for us to call someone back in 2 to 3 hours. We need something in an hour turnaround to pitch something or to show up to a meeting sometimes. That's a reality. It might sound unrealistic, but that's what I dealt with in the ad agency world. That's the stressful part of it. And if you're not prepared for that, it's going to be problematic for you. So I would say, get used to that. But part of what you can do is you can give yourself challenges. Some of you may have seen the speed art Photoshop stuff that I was doing last year, and I'm going to do some more of that and share it on the channel. But I do projects like that, and I give myself a clock of 30 minutes to an hour to create something from scratch, to really push my creativity and also push my production speed, and it will make you faster and it will make you a better designer as a result. So I would encourage you to learn to take advantage of speed and to just very practically get very quick at doing things. So again, this is some advice from the real world. I'm here in New York visiting family. I'm on my way back, actually. I'm heading to the train station now. But I want to get this video out for you guys because I thought it was important, and I wanted to share that with you, and I want to give you some real world perspective on being a graphic designer is actually like. And I think it's cool to kind of do a video like this that's unproduced and unpolished, and just really put it out there and go all in with you guys. All the mistakes, all the flubs, all the ums and ahs and all the pauses, uncut, unfiltered, unedited. So there you go. Now all of you can stop saying that I'm using a teleprompter, because I'm not. I'm actually not. I can't see well enough to use a teleprompter if I wanted to. So there you go. This is a real video from the real world, and now you know what being a graphic designer is really like, at least a little bit. Now, to end this on a little bit more of an upbeat note, the good thing about being a graphic designer is that you get to be awesome. You get to actually create things that matter, and that you care about if you're doing it, for the right reasons or for the right people. And you can explore your creativity in all these interesting ways. You get to be a storyteller. You get to literally paint images out of ideas snatched from your mind or someone else's. You get to be a magician. You get to be an alchemist. You get to put all these interesting things together and make something new and different. You get to remix. So it's a lot of fun. That's what I love about it. That's why I'm passionate about it, because it just lets me explore so many facets of my personality and my interest. And that's really the joy in being a graphic designer. So if you got in this to get rich, good luck with that. But if you got in this to be creative and to be a storyteller and to do interesting things, then stay on that path and just do things that help you feel encouraged and motivated to do that. And if you need help, you need questions, I'm always here for you. Anyway, like this video if you like it. Don't forget to subscribe. Check out the other awesome content on the channel. We should be back to business as usual tomorrow. As always, you guys, thanks so much for watching. And don't forget, create something awesome today.